The emergency beacon died with a pathetic wheeze, its final pulse swallowed by the endless dark of Veridax Prime. Lyra pressed her back against the crashed pod's hull, feeling the metal still warm from atmospheric entry. Around her, the jungle breathed, a symphony of clicks, growls, and rustling that spoke of predators circling in the bioluminescent mist. They said humans couldn't survive the night, she whispered to herself, fingers trembling as she checked her supply pack. 3 protein bars, a broken med kit, a plasma cutter with maybe 10 minutes of charge left. The Galactic Council had been clear. Veridax Prime was a death world, rated Class 9 hostile. No species had ever survived its surface after dark. The atmosphere carried spores that induced madness. The predators hunted in coordinated packs. The temperature dropped to levels that could freeze oxygen in mammalian lungs. Humans, they said with their fragile frames and slow reflexes, would last perhaps an hour. Lyra had been down for 3. The first sound came from her left, a low, rumbling growl that vibrated through the soil. She spun, plasma cutter igniting with a blue-white hiss. In the dim light, she saw them. 6 pairs of eyes, each the size of her fist, reflecting gold and green. Veridax stalkers. Apex predators, 4-legged, scale-covered, each one massing at least 300 kilograms. The council file said they traveled in family units, led by a matriarch who could snap titanium cables with her jaws. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs. The lead stalker emerged from the ferns, its massive head lowered, lips peeling back to reveal rows of serrated teeth. Behind it, 5 smaller forms followed. Cubs, she realized. Still deadly. Still larger than Earth wolves, but cubs nonetheless. Easy, Lyra breathed, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to them or herself. The matriarch took another step forward, then stopped. Her massive nostrils flared, scenting the air. The cubs pressed close to their mother's flanks, confused by her hesitation. Lyra saw the moment of decision in those alien eyes, the calculation, the assessment. Then the jungle erupted. Something massive crashed through the canopy above, something that made the stalker matriarch look small. Lyra caught a glimpse of chitinous plates, of mandibles wide enough to swallow her whole, of countless legs that turned the forest floor into a seething carpet. A dreadmaw, the apex above the apex. The matriarch roared a warning to her cubs, but it was too late. The dreadmaw descended like a living avalanche, its primary jaws snapping toward the smallest cub, a runt that had strayed too far from the pack. Lyra moved without thinking. The plasma cutter screamed as she drove it upward, catching the dreadmaw's reaching appendage. Chitin cracked and hissed, alien ichor sprang across her suit. The creature shrieked, its attention whipping toward this new, audacious threat. "Run!" Lyra screamed at the cubs, at the matriarch, at anything that would listen. She rolled aside as a massive claw cratered the ground where she'd stood. The plasma cutter flickered. 5 minutes left, maybe less. The matriarch didn't run. Instead, she lunged, catching the dreadmaw's secondary jaw in her own. The 2 titans crashed together, but Lyra could see the truth. The stalker was outmatched. Already bleeding from a dozen wounds, already tiring. The cubs huddled together, terrified. The runt, the one Lyra had saved, looked at her with those massive golden eyes. Lyra made her choice. She charged back into the fight, sliding beneath the dreadmaw's bulk, and drove the plasma cutter into the soft joint where its primary legs met its thorax. The scent of burning flesh filled her nostrils. The creature reared back, shrieking, giving the matriarch the opening she needed. The stalker's jaws found the dreadmaw's throat. There was a sickening crunch, and then silence. The dreadmaw collapsed, twitching, as its nervous system finally registered death. The matriarch released her grip, staggering, one eye swollen shut, scales cracked and bleeding. Lyra's plasma cutter died with a whimper. She dropped it, legs shaking, and slumped against a tree. Around her, the jungle had gone quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after violence, when even the predators pause to reassess the world. The matriarch approached slowly. Lyra tensed, knowing she had nothing left to defend herself with. But the great beast simply lowered her massive head and huffed, a warm blast of air that smelled of copper and alien biology. Then she turned and called to her cubs with a low, rumbling vocalization. The cubs approached cautiously, sniffing at Lyra with wrinkled snouts. The runt, the one she'd saved, pressed against her side. She was so warm, Lyra realized, like a living furnace. As the temperature began to drop, as the spores thickened in the air and Lyra's breath started to mist, the cubs arranged themselves around her. The runt stayed pressed against her left side. Another settled against her right. A third draped itself across her legs. The matriarch lay down at Lyra's back, forming a wall of scales and warmth. Karen, Lyra thought randomly, naming the eldest cub who had positioned himself between her and the jungle. His young eyes alert and watchful. If I survive this, I'll tell them about Karen. About how he stood guard while I shivered through the coldest part of the night. The spores came, filling her vision with phantoms and whispers. But the cub's warmth kept her anchored. When she began to drift, Karen would huff and nudge her shoulder. When she shook with cold, the others pressed closer. They said humans couldn't survive the night, but they hadn't accounted for the human who would throw herself into battle to save a predator's cub. They hadn't accounted for the gratitude of a mother. They hadn't accounted for the bond that forms when two species, however different, recognize courage in each other. Dawn came slowly to Veridac's prime, painted in shades of violet and gold. Lyra opened her eyes to find Karen still on watch, his golden gaze fixed on the jungle beyond. The other cubs slept in a pile around her, snoring softly. The matriarch rose with a grunt, checked her cubs, then fixed Lyra with a long, measuring look. She huffed once, a sound that might have been respect or acknowledgement, or simply farewell. Then the family melted back into the jungle, leaving Lyra alone with the rising sun and the smoking wreckage of her pod. In the distance, she heard the whine of rescue ships breaking atmosphere. They said humans couldn't survive the night. Lyra smiled, touching the spot where Karen had kept watch. They were wrong, she whispered to the dawn.